All right. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to our February event. My name is Hillary Taverna. I'm here with our speaker, John Zilch, today. So we'll pass it over to him in just a few minutes, but would love to just give some context for who BPMA is if you haven't joined the session yet, a session of ours yet. And then we'll kick it over to him and leave some time at the end for Q&A. So welcome. The topic for today is the quality lever, how to build a product you're proud of. It'll be just about an hour. So hopefully you can take this as you have lunch if you're on the East Coast. So BPMA, Boston Product Management Association. We are a professional association started in the greater Boston area, where we dedicate our time and our resources to career development for both product management and product marketing professionals. As I said, we started sort of Boston-based, but especially since COVID, we've really tried to expand and have more of a wider reach beyond just the immediate Boston area. So if you're joining us from another location, it's great to have you, and looking forward to having you join future events as well. So we offer different things like events such as this one. So we try to do one virtual event per month throughout the year. And then we're just starting to get back into in-person events. So I'll make a little plug towards the end of this for our next in-person event, which will be next month in the Boston area. We also have a product blog where you can learn more about some of the topics that we speak about in these events or that you might be interested in. And then we also offer for members a mentorship program, and there's a public-facing job board where you can see job postings related to the product space. So definitely check out the website. If you just Google BPMA, Boston Product Management Association, you'll find us, and you can learn more there. And that's where you can find links to future events such as this one and get signed up. Just a quick shout out to our sponsors and our partners who are kind of listed here. A lot of these organizations are doing some great work in the product space, whether it's connecting you to potential jobs or providing resources to learn more about topics in the product space as well. So definitely check them out. We've had speakers from a number of these organizations come and run events for us. So really trying to build a community here. But big shout out to our sponsors and our partners for making a lot of these events and offerings possible. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, so we did do a couple of in-person events last year. We did one in the summer and one in the fall. The most recent one, November 30th, was hosted by a partner of ours, Dan from Slalom, and it was hosted in the Slalom office. And we did a lean coffee format. If you've never done that, it's an interactive format for getting folks together, democratizing the topics that we talk about and the questions, and really just getting a chance to network and learn from one another. So keep an eye out. This will be posted very shortly, probably within the week. For our next Lean Coffee event. It will also be at the Slalom office in Boston. I believe it's on Boylston Street. And it will be March 22nd from 6 to 8:30 p.m. So get a chance to mingle. There will be some food and drinks, network, and then have sort of an hour or so of real productive, interactive time to use this Lean Coffee format. So hope to see you there. Again, keep an eye out for that on our website. Be posted shortly. So that's BPMA. Again, I hope we see you at future events, but feel free at any point to, to reach out to myself or Prachi, and happy to, figure out how we can provide value to you through BPMA. If you're interested in a membership or in volunteering, happy to chat. So I'm going to pass it over to John, who's the Senior Director of Product at Sugar CRM. He's going to walk us through some questions and topics related to product quality today. So I'll stop sharing and give John a chance to share his screen and introduce himself. But just to note as well, I know this question always comes up in these sessions, but we will provide the recording to this event afterwards. It's typically posted to our website within a couple of days. And if you'd like a copy of the slides as well, we can make those available. So John, I'll kick it over to you. Welcome, and thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for having me, Hillary, and the BPMA organization. It's a great organization. I'd encourage all of you to get involved or even more involved. in the group. It's been fantastic for me. Can everyone see a screen of someone engineering a building at a high rise? An ironic screen, given I'm really scared of heights. But thanks everyone for joining today. Just a quick intro. So John Zilch, I've been in product management for about 10 years. Feels like longer, but it's been 10 years, and it's been a fantastic 10 years. And one of the themes and patterns I've seen in my career, being in B2B product management, is a focus on quality. And I'm not in marketing, so I don't know if I branded this presentation the best way. But when I'm speaking about quality, I really mean the qualities that make up a really excellent product that customers love, and just as important, that we're proud of, right? We all, I'm guessing, got into product management because we wanted to solve problems and make customers happy and do all these great things. And sometimes that can be hard, right? That can be challenging, right? With all the different pressures and constraints that we might have. So I've dealt with it in all sorts of different positions, from a junior PM to a director to a senior product manager, and all the different levels, managing a team. And I've seen a lot of different things, and I thought I had an hour's worth of tips and tricks and experiences that I could share with you all. And I've done some research on other companies too that I think will help us pull what I'm calling the quality lever, which means prioritizing quality above all else. And I think I hope you'll take away some, be inspired by this, but also take away some next steps for you to take action and do this with your own products or product lines. So thanks again for being here. We'll do some question and answers at the end. One thing that could be interesting is, if you wouldn't mind, in the chat, just type in the product that you manage today, if you manage a product, or the feature within the product that you manage. I'm just really interested in hearing what everyone's working on, and that would be great to know too. So let's get started. So what's interesting about my career, and probably a distinction that I don't think I share with many of you on the line, I worked for a company named Mobile Commons, or a product called Mobile Commons. And Mobile Commons started out trying to support the nonprofit industry by enabling text messages and engagement. So essentially, if nonprofits wanted to reach out to all of their supporters and donors, they would use us to send text messages. And when Mobile Commons was started, long before I joined, they started with smaller groups, and then eventually grew, which is what every company wants, and started picking up larger and larger nonprofits and even government agencies, to the point where the tech that they had built really no longer supported the type of scale that they were seeing from their customers. And when I joined, there was this mission, there was this strategy to go and build a brand new platform over to the side. And that new platform was going to have a shiny UI, and it was going to have the more modern technology, and it was going to be able to support everything we wanted to do and every customer we wanted to take on. And it sounded great, but it took too long. It took too long, and our customers became impatient. And the distinction that I have is, I've had a customer who's canceled on us, who happened to be the president of the United States of America. So the office of Joe Biden said, thank you, but no thank you. This product is no longer working for us. You're not getting our text messages out as quickly as we'd like. We're going to move on to a competitor of yours, right? So we made that decision to solve the problem in one way by building a new platform, and the consequences, we lost by far our largest customer, which was obviously problematic. So I want to talk a little bit about why these things happen, right? I mean, this is probably my most severe example of this, but I'd love to hear from all of you with your stories toward the end of this, as you hear some of these cases. Maybe you've got other angles you've taken at this, but I started thinking about it. Why does quality sometimes get left behind? Why don't we keep up with some of the performance items that we want, that we should, or that our customers are asking us for? So I started doing some research, and it went way back to 1969, so over 50 years ago. There's this gentleman here on the screen, Martin Barnes, Dr. Martin Barnes, who was working on his doctoral thesis on contract management, which essentially became project management. And over time, he started to foster this idea of there's three constraints. Maybe some of you have heard of this concept of the iron triangle, which he invented, right? Or at least conceptualized. And he said there's really three things that make up any project, right? From the products that we build or the roadmap items that we have to painting our room in our house, right? You've got scope. How much of it are we doing? Resources. What do we have to actually do the job? And then how long do we have to do it? So time. So very simply, if we look at anything that we're trying to do, any initiative that we're trying to take on in life, let's assume that there's three constraints. There's scope, there's resources, and time. And that became what he would lay out as the iron triangle. So you see scope, resources, time. Now, when you put those things together, you try to create something out of it, the end product ends up being quality, right? This is what we're creating based on those constraints or those pressures that we had of scope, resources, and time. Now, scope, resources, and time aren't typically things that we make up, right? Maybe scope, we have some control over resources and time, but a lot of the time, those things are actually coming from other teams or other areas, right? So scope might be marketing and sales saying, we really need this feature. We can't be competitive, for instance, right? Resources is finance or engineering saying, here's what you have to work with. And I've always been in the B2B software industry. So a lot of the times I'm given a team and saying, you've got to build what you want to build with that team. But marketing wants this scope. And also the market is expecting this thing to be out by this time, right? That could be the market, that could be internal pressures. But typically there's someone saying, when is the release date for this? We need to be ready for it. We're going to lock that in. And the purpose of what I'd like to talk about today is when quality kind of gets squished in between these three things, because I don't like that. What I'm really trying to encourage is that we rethink that, right? So what if quality looked something different? What if it looked like this triangle or this triangle or this triangle? What if this was actually the quality product that we should be building, not what we were looking at before? And if we knew that, if we knew, okay, this is the type of triangle that I can't remember my, fifth grade geometry, but whatever this kind of triangle is, right? Now we can kind of piece around that, the constraint. We know, okay, we're going to need this much in time. We're going to need this much time. We're going to need this many resources, and we're going to want to build to this scope, right? Because now, right, it makes sense. And we know that what's going to come out of this is going to be something that our customers are going to love. And it's going to be a product that we're proud of because they love it. That essentially is what I want to talk about today with pulling that quality lever. How do we change that perspective? How do we change that talk track from here's what you have for the levers, you go build your product with that, to nope, this is the product I want to build. I want to go fix mobile commons so that it can send whatever it is, 6 million text messages at a time, right? Or within a couple hours. That's the product we should be building. And here's what we're going to need to go do that. So make features, deadlines, costs, the function of product excellence, not the other way around. Okay. It would be a really cruel joke if I ended the presentation right here saying, yeah, let's all go do that, right? Because I think it takes a lot, not only to make that happen, but to understand what are we actually asking for? What does that triangle look like? What is that quality lever that we need to go and encourage the rest of the organization to get behind? So, little personal fun fact: my great grandmother had sat in on a Norman Rockwell painting once. She cleaned hotel rooms, and there was a painting of them cleaning up after a wedding or something. And so I've got this link to Norman Rockwell. I also like his artwork. I also love this quote: "Sooner or later, everyone sits down to a banquet of consequences." So I want to talk about the impact that we have when when quality is almost decided for us in a way. And you can see this this young girl here is on her way to the principal's office, although she looks kind of happy to be there, I think, after what looks like some kind of scrap made or something. But typically, these decisions have consequences that matter, and even the best in the world can suffer from this. So Apple, infamously, I suppose, I think it was 2012, they wanted to build a new Maps app for their device. Before, they had been using Google Maps. Google started to tighten the screws a little bit. They started to, especially as Android was becoming more popular, and said, well, you're going to have this mapping technology, but you're not going to get this. And Apple, of course, the relationship started to fray. So Apple said, okay, we're going to go off and build our own. And they rushed it. They wanted, in their most hyper-competitive mode, they rushed it to market. And what happened is a disastrous product experience. Now, it doesn't look so bad on the screen, but that first right that you're taking, that blue line, those are actually train tracks, right? So that's not where you want to be driving a car. And what Apple was using for technology was really poor. They had to rebuild the app. They had to apologize to all the Apple users out there. And they had to put their tail between the legs and say, you know what, actually go use Google Maps again, even on our devices. It's a better product. This one's sad, right? So Peloton was crushing it during the pandemic. Everyone was at home. Folks wanted to exercise still. They couldn't go to a gym. They couldn't build enough of their stationary bikes to sell. And they thought, let's capitalize on this. This is going great, right, for the business. So they started to push to market a new treadmill called the Tread Plus. And the Tread Plus, if you're familiar with the story, was not up to snuff for quality, to say the least. There were all sorts of really terrible accidents, fatal accidents. I think a child passed away, got caught under. Pets, sorry to be so morbid, but this stuff really happened. And Peloton had to pay, large penalties, and they, of course, recalled the product. And the CEO was eventually removed, not only because of this story, but in part, and the stock took a nosedive as well, right? So again, these decisions do have consequences and are important. So if you believe that, right, that the impact is enough where, we don't want to do that. We want to build a really high quality product that we're proud of. How do we do it? I think there's 4 ingredients that we stir into that, right? I think there's 4 ingredients that you need to have. And we're going to go through each one. The first is corporate strategy. What is it that our business is trying to achieve at the highest level in the simplest form of strategy? The next is customer expectations. If I know my corporate strategy, what should be the product strategy, and what do my customers expect based on that? Based on our pricing, based on our model. What's customer definition of quality? Because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Internal alignment, right? So now I know what I want to build. How do I get everyone at the organization to get behind me? It's really hard. It's hard in a lot of ways, right? But it's hard, and I think it's hard for any of us in any position, despite where you might be in your org structure. And then lastly is what culture, what team do I need to actually make it all happen? How do I put this into motion? So let's start with strategy. I love this story too. Spirit Airlines, right? I think even if you went to their website today, they would call themselves, right, unabashedly, the ultra low cost air travel provider. Not just low cost, ultra low cost, meaning you probably won't beat them on price, which of course has a market, right? And that is a decision that they made, or they are making, in terms of their go-to-market strategy. And what's the consequence of that? Well, they have a low quality product, right? Now they'll get you to your destination, and not if you want to drink a water or a bottle of water, it's going to cost you. If you want to print your boarding pass, that's an extra cost, right? And they're ranked the worst airline for customer service since 2017. So this is kind of a counterexample or an anti-example of, we're not always talking about high quality. We're talking about a strategy that can determine what your level of quality should be. And they've been successful, right? At least up until recently, or most recently, their Q4 in 2022 revenue was up 21%. And they've got a pending acquisition by JetBlue. It seems to change by the day, but they might get their exit too, right? So their strategy is paying off for them. And the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Michael Porter, I love that as well. We'll talk a little bit more about Michael Porter in a second, actually right now. So this framework is one of my favorites. I like simple frameworks. I like something I can just kind of, one slide and I can work with. And if you've taken, a strategy class in school or anything, you've probably seen this. But I think it's really, really important and a really helpful tool. Porter, and this is it's a very high level, simple framework, right, for just understanding generic strategy, which I think is also important, at least for today's, for what we're talking about today. So he looks at it across 2 dimensions. One is scope. Are you trying to build something for everyone, for the world? Or are you trying to build for a very narrow segment, a niche, market segment? So that's the first determination or first question. Second is, what's my advantage? Is it cost leadership, like Spirit, right? I'm not going to pay a lot for customer service, but that allows me then to drop prices. So that's a strategy, right? Or I'm going to be differentiated. I'm going to be different than everyone else, so unique that customers are willing to pay more, and there's increased demand on that sense. So if you just kind of map those two things, there's 4 boxes. And the trick question I always like to ask is, which box is the best or which box is the worst? What Michael Porter would say is, there's no box that's the best as long as you're in a box. The worst box to be in is one he's added called stuck in the middle, which means your organization doesn't really know, right? You're maybe kind of trying to do 2 things at once, which is always problematic, right? The essence of strategy is knowing what not to do. So I say all of this because it's important to know, what level of quality do we need to provide to our customers, right? It might differ depending on which box you end up in. And I'd say what's a really useful tool, or what has been useful to me in my career, walk around your organization, right? For me, it's all virtual, but as I'm in these one-on-ones, I say, oh, by the way, we've got a few minutes left. Can I just ask you, according to this framework, where do you think we're at? And I asked a few people at my organization or places I've worked before. And the scary part is when different people say different boxes, right? Some people are really honest and say that we're stuck in the middle, and they're probably right because other people are across the map. But as you start to have that conversation, right, it'll come together, or at least you'll have your own, opinion of which box the organization plays in. If you're lucky enough to know exactly what that is today for your product line or your the company you worked at, that's great. Check that box. I work at Sugar CRM today. When I started here, I noticed that for my individual product, right, not speaking for the company, but for my individual product, marketing automation tool, we are pursuing this really big strategy, really ambitious strategy called Top Shelf. And what that means is we want it to be the top shelf kind of, if you go to shopping for alcohol or something, the best stuff is on the top shelf. And we wanted to be the best marketing automation platform in the world. The problem was we've got about, I don't know, 10%, maybe less, of the resources building our product that our competitors do. So I asked questions, right? I said, is this really what we want to try to accomplish? Because it's going to be really hard to be putting in the type of resources we are to this project, and also being something that's differentiated and unique. So that was a strategy that we had been employing and going after. The consequence was we were seeing very static growth over a few years, right? So over the last few years, our growth was pretty much flat, and we had been kind of chasing our own tail. Of course, if you're not paying attention to quality, you're losing customers, even as you're gaining customers with new features. So it wasn't. We were able to kind of shift our mindset there, which was good. And I'll talk more about how we did that later on. But the takeaway on strategy is, make sure it's clear, make sure everyone's aligned to it, right? The best you can. I know that's hard to do, but if you can get people to say, yeah, I think that is where we want to go, it's going to make the rest of this adventure, this process, really easy. So now let's talk about customer expectations. And this one's really important to me too, because this is when we're talking to our customers. This is when we're doing the research, understanding exactly what the quality lever means to them. And where this gets interesting, right, is the quality dynamics of your product can differ depending on what the customer needs or wants. So we're kind of going a level down from the corporate strategy now to the product strategy. What do customers expect for quality? White Star Line, that name is not as common as the Titanic. They were the ones operating the Titanic. Their decision was to optimize for experience, very best silverware on board, and the whole experience above deck was incredible. We've all seen the movie, right? Very very fancy in many ways. Obviously, we know what the consequence of this was, which was disastrous, right? But what a lot of folks don't know, they probably think, and I thought when I started researching it, yeah, they probably didn't use great material, not a good design of the boat, maybe the wrong people, they didn't see the iceberg, whatever it might be. They've done research, right? The boat was actually constructed with steel that was pretty premium for that time. And the design had some flaws, but for the most part, it should have been okay, right? It's just a fluke accident. But where they went wrong is they didn't have enough lifeboats, and we lost lives because of the lack of lifeboats that they had on board. So why didn't they have enough lifeboats on board? Interestingly enough, they took a lot of them down, right? Left them on shore or offshore right before they departed because those boats were impeding the views for some of the folks who had bought higher fare tickets, right? So kind of your first class passengers looking out their window didn't want to see lifeboats. So they put those aside and said, all right, let's go, right? So in one sense, we can look at quality as being experience, intuitiveness, right? How do people adopt the product? That's important. But what about security and safety, right? In this case, they pulled one lever over the other and obviously took a gamble, I suppose, in that sense. So the customer needs may change, but their bias for quality never does, says J. Willard Marriott. And I think it's really critical, right, that we think about our products as adjectives, not just nouns, right? So I'm just reading a couple of the items that you put in chat, and if you had asked me, I'd say marketing automation. That's my thing, right? I see a lot of different offerings here where you talk about the what, right? And I think that's just kind of our instinct or our reflex as product managers is like, this is what we've built, right? This is what we offer to customers. I would strongly encourage that you start thinking about your product as an adjective plus a noun. I think it's really helpful. Maybe multiple adjectives, right? We are the most accurate weather app, right, on the iPhone, whatever it might be. We're the fastest right now. I'm really dependent on my Wi-Fi if I want to get through this hour, right? I want it to be stable and I want it to be performant. And I'm probably paying for that, right, to some extent. Probably could go cheaper. Every product out there is some kind of adjective or set of adjectives. Now, if you're a product manager for Reebok or something and you're building shoes, I don't know if all of these 6 apply. By all means, we should create our own kind of rubric here in terms of what the quality adjectives are. But for me, being in B2B enterprise software, these 6 have often been the ones I categorize around. So stability, is the thing going to hold up? Is it reliable? Does it scale? Performant, is it fast enough to get the job done? Delightful, can I use it without a whole lot of head scratching? Is it useful? Does it have the tools and capabilities I need? I know we talked about scope before, but usefulness does count. You do need features, right, that are going to solve a problem for a customer. Not too many features, as we know, but have features. Is it accurate, right? Whether that's analytics, reporting, really important. And then safety and security. A lot of the tools, that's kind of table stakes, but worth mentioning too. If you work in healthcare, for instance, safety and security probably even has more of an emphasis on your product directive or direction than it would otherwise. And just as an aside, I think a lot of folks might be wondering, well, wait a minute, are you saying I always need to have perfect quality all the time? No, I think in the different stages of a development process, there are definitely times when quality can be ratcheted up or down, right? Even outside of the strategy we talked about with Spirit Airlines. But even if you're building something that's going to ultimately be really high quality, it doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to be at that level as you're getting ready for a product release, right? So in development, as we all know, the engineers are going to miss things in unit testing and things will slip by and they'll go to QA. And QA will do their automated testing and they'll find bugs or issues, right? And then what we like to do at Sugar, and I really enjoy this part of the process, is we've got an internal group that are going to test our product and give us feedback. And that's beneficial in a lot of ways. But often, I think pretty much every time we've done it, I've sent them a list of 7, 8 bullet points saying, these are bugs we know about and we're working on. Just ignore that for now, if you see that, right? And they'll find other stuff, but we can say that to them and say, yeah, those will be fixed soon. Sorry, and that expectation set. Similar to a beta, but now you're starting to get more serious, right? These might be actual customers or even prospects or people that that you're not as close with as your coworkers, and you want to make it high quality, especially as you're trying to build the brand or get a good sense of how much they're enjoying the product. And then, of course, as you go to GA or general availability, it's released to the world, and that's where that quality level needs to be set appropriately. So takeaway on all this is, based on that corporate strategy, build a product strategy that's based on customer expectations, and think about the product as which adjectives do you want to focus on and prioritize? And how does that allocation work for your product line? Or even your feature, right? I know when I started out, I owned a feature of a product that was part of a product line that was part of a company. So we all kind of live in different areas here. I think it's important to note that. Next is internal alignment, and this is another big one, and this is really hard. And this one I would say right off the bat, just be prepared to give it some time. I doubt these things happen in a day, right? Getting folks to align to, oh, okay, we're going to actually start to prioritize quality over other things. Just as a, to use an example that's completely outside of technology, I think it's a great example, especially in the month of February, right? So Jackie Robinson broke down the color barrier that existed in Major League Baseball in 1947, and was the perfect person to do that, right? He was courageous and obviously had the right personality and was patient and was willing to go through what he went through, which makes him a hero. And to assist with that was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, who had been trying for 5 years, right, to break down the color barrier and desegregate baseball. And what's interesting about the story is Branch Rickey, who's the general manager, had two motivations for doing this. One was the moral obligation. He really felt strongly that this shouldn't exist anymore. Segregation should not happen. And then two, from the business side, right, it was, we're going to create a much better product by making this move too. Now, regardless of which one he felt more strongly about it, I hope it was the former. But he actually pitched this change and got buy-in for this change by going with the business objective first. Because for better or worse, that is what the folks across the Brooklyn Dodgers organization were aligned with, right? They knew, based on our corporate strategy, right, or our product strategy, we're all aligned to make this happen. So that was a much easier road, but to get where Branch Rickey wanted to get to, with the same end result, right, of breaking down the barriers there. And of course, Jackie Robinson paved the way for many others after him. So I love this quote too, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And that's the tricky part, right? How do I do that and get others to join in that fight? My own experiences at Sugar, so I mentioned I joined there, and there was that strategy around Top Shelf, and I didn't think it was exactly the right strategy for us at that time. I wanted to focus more on the quality of the product, and I had data that backed that up. That was really important too. But I did a couple different things. So one, I framed the current strategy as having been successful. So the Top Shelf strategy up until that point had garnered the attention of a lot of analysts in our field and had put us on the map, right, as a marketing automation tool that could go up against some of the big ones in the industry. And that was really important. That was one of our goals. But what I wanted to do was sort of change that strategy, and I wanted to frame it not as a pivot, because there was a lot of people that were emotionally tied to that strategy and been working really hard to make that strategy a success. I didn't want to frame it as a pivot, but more as an evolution, right? We've accomplished this. Now let's go and actually save some of our retention numbers by accomplishing the quality problem that we're seeing. And again, retention being a big part of our corporate strategy, I could tie that product strategy back to the business strategy and get much better momentum. And I was speaking with a professor at University of New England up in Maine. His name's John Austin, Professor John Austin. It was really interesting because he's done a lot of research on the Jackie Robinson story. And I was just interviewing him about it. And we got into, what we're here to talk about, right? Product management. And I said, well, gosh, folks are at different levels of organization. Some people are just starting out in product. How in the world can folks maybe in a junior level or even senior PMs, right? But they might be a few levels away from the top. How can they work to change a strategy? That's really hard. And he made a really good point. And he didn't even pause before he said it, right? He didn't have to think about it. He goes, we all have our sphere of influence. And we might not be able to influence things at the top and have those things trickle down, but what if we could influence upward? What if we can just model some change in our own world, right? Whether that's our own corner of the product or our own small product or product line, what have you, and say, yeah, our goal is this. We want to ratchet up quality, and here's how we're going to do it. And then be very communicative around why and the progress that you've had along the way. If you can model that change and why it's worked better for you, it might catch on throughout the organization, and you have a much better chance, right, of selling that to others that might be in a leadership role. So I love that whole sphere of influence idea. I think it's really important. How are we doing on time? Okay. So the takeaway for this one, right? Model the change, right, in your own sphere of influence in your own area. Tie your outcomes to those to the business strategy, and evolve the strategy. If you're changing things, right? If the team had never done that, if it's like, yeah, we do monthly releases and you've got 3 resources and, this is what we expect and this is what the market's asking for features. And if you don't think that's the right approach, you want to focus more on having a high quality product, think of it more as an evolution of the strategy than a pivot. Okay, last area, culture and team. Now this team on the right does not look like they're in complete agreement, so we'll have to suspend our disbelief here. But what's important is, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit from Aristotle. So how do we build into our culture, into the fabric of how we work, this idea of quality comes first? I had an interesting experience at Virgin Pulse. These names are completely made up. There's obviously a generated picture here, but I worked with 2 individuals. We'll call them Mary and Allison. And Allison was on another team, and folks were encouraging me to bring her into product. So I interviewed Allison, who's the second one listed here, and I said, "Why do you want to do product management? I'm glad you're interested in it, but tell me what your goals are." And she said, and I quote, "I want to tell the engineers what to do." And I thought, wow, okay. And I was being really pressured to bringing Allison onto the team. I was told of all the virtues, very smart, very dedicated, and all those things ended up being true, by the way. But I was very nervous. And then there was a pause, and I said, "Well, tell me more about that." And she said, "Well, I don't think they know what to do today. I think they're a little bit lost." And I thought, okay, that's a better answer. I kind of like that. And Allison joined the team, and there were circumstances where I think she butted heads with engineering leadership or maybe even other product people, folks in support or sales, and she was very blunt. She was very blunt, and when folks would ask her maybe take on work that was outside of her charter, she would often just say no, it's not something I can do right now. We had someone else on the team named Mary, and Mary was the most popular person on the team, well liked, organized social events, at work. Had a real can-do attitude, deep knowledge of many product areas. And the twist ending here, right, what I thought was really interesting is looking back on this experience, Allison built much, much better products. In fact, the products that Mary was attached to were often associated with lower quality because she spread herself so thin, right? And I'll be honest, it wasn't Mary's fault, right? It was my fault. It was leadership's fault. I should have spoke up and said, no, we shouldn't be working on those 10 things at once. We're spreading ourselves too thin. And when we do that, the quality is what suffers, right? Just think of 10, quality iron triangles from before instead of just one. Whereas Allison, she would ask for my support and I'd give it to her and she'd say no to these things. And she'd be laser focused on 1 or 2, initiatives within her product. And those things were built to a very high quality and were much, much more successful on the market. Right. So that was a really important learning about culture to me. It wasn't so much about Mary or Allison, right? They're both excellent, but putting them in different positions to succeed and building it into your culture, that quality is going to come first. So a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago or so, I was hiking with my family, and afterward we were hungry, and I said, "Oh, there's a brewery, and I've got kids, so like a great dad, I brought my kids to a brewery, and I said, I think they serve pizza and stuff." And it's Castle Island in Norwood, Mass. Great place, great experience and all that. Really cozy place to hang out. Um, and as I was sitting there, chewing on a piece of pizza, sipping a beer, I looked way over to the side where the trucks leave the warehouse or the brewery, and they had this old looking sign that hung above the door, and it said, "If you're not proud of it, don't ship it." And I like stared at that sign for like, a good 30, 45 seconds. My wife was, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "That's just a great sign." And I called them and I asked about the sign, and they said, "Actually, we didn't put that up. It was there when we got here. It was the previous owners." And I said, "Oh, so you just left it?" They go, "We cleared out everything. We made the whole space our own, but we left that sign. And we actually think about it all the time. And we built it into some of our processes. So we have a very thorough testing process as the beer's leaving the facility. And if it's not up to snuff, we pour it out. And we've lost a lot of money that way." And that sign kind of hangs over us almost like, I don't know, an eye from the sky kind of judging them or something, right? To say, this is kind of your quality audit here, asking the hard questions. And often they'll throw away the beer. And then on Thursdays, the whole team gets together, sits around a conference room, and they sip the beer that was brewed or what they're thinking about, putting on the market. And it's not a social event. They actually bring in coloring books, right? So that folks won't be socializing and they'll be just really focused on both coloring, but also the beer, the taste of the beer. And they'll make decisions based on that, right? So everything they do, even to the layout and the experience within the brewery and the restaurant area, whatever it's called, the garden there, is built around this idea of their culture and their culture around quality. And I thought it was really neat, something outside of tech. So, parting words here for culture and team: craft a mission. I think that's really important. Set the quality expectations. So we learned those in the last step, right? Or I guess 2 steps ago. What are those quality expectations, and what do we expect the team? How do we want to build that into how we work? Just said that, right? So build that mantra into how the team works. Hire accordingly. I think it's really important, to have the will and the way. So having a dedicated team that cares about quality is important. But I've worked at a few different places where we just had team members that we had to swap out, right? So we'd move one person to another team and bring in an architect, or bring in someone who could who had the skill set to help on the quality mission that we had, right? So if you want to fix your security or permissions issue, whatever it might be, you need someone who really knows that space really well and can fix it. We've even hired contractors to come in and really just tell us what we didn't know. And that was really, really valuable. So it's easy to say, yeah, have a culture that accepts quality and wants to build high quality things, but you actually have the skills on your team that can make that a reality. And then lastly, and maybe most important, keep score, or just as important, keep score. Know that you're actually hitting the metrics that you defined earlier in this list, right? Here's just a very crude example of how you might do that across those 6 adjectives. So stability, how often are we up? Critical escalations, performance, whatever the function might be, how is it performing? Usefulness. I know there's a lot of detractor. There's a lot of folks who don't love it, but an NPS or a customer satisfaction score can give you some insights to how useful the product is if they're willing to recommend it. Delightfulness, how easy are you adopting the product, or are customers adopting the product? Accuracy, right? Kind of goes without saying, what's our accuracy rate if I'm testing a sample? And then, of course, if you're doing penetration testing or any kind of security audit, what are those results? How many critical high, low issues are we seeing? So in the last 2 companies I've worked at, I have written user stories and epics and prioritized on our list the instrumentation to be able to build these dashboards out. It's not the most exciting thing sometimes, but once you talk people into it and kind of get them wrapped around, okay, well, this is the benefit, and we'll be able to use this and make sure we're making progress. People, it definitely proves its value out over time. So takeaways: build a will and a way team and a culture built for quality, and by all means, keep score. Okay, those are the 4 things as I see them. Would love to hear all your ideas, and I will just close with 2 more slides here. Probably I've talked about where I've messed up, and maybe had to go fix things. The time my crowning achievement in my product career was at Dun & Bradstreet. I think a few of you might be on the call from there. It wasn't easy, but we built a product from scratch a few years ago. while I was there, and really made decisions that were the right ones for the product that we needed to build. From the strategy side, we were a differentiated company, and knew that we had a premium offering. Customer expectations, we were getting a lot of pressure from internal folks saying, "Oh, you've got this opportunity to build whatever you want from scratch. We've always wanted this feature or that feature or this other thing. It would be so cool." Right? And they were cool ideas. And I would probably have had more fun building some of those things if I'm being perfectly honest. But when we talk to customers and even some of our internal partners, they're like, "Really, we're a data content company." I mean, Dun& Bradstreet, was a data content company where we were building the software to deliver it. The most important thing is the plumbing, right? Make sure we're getting the most accurate, up-to-date data. Make sure it can scale, and make sure it's performant, right? So that it's pumping into our customers' systems at the rate they want it. And we went and we built it, right? And we did have a constraint of time. We wanted to unveil it at an industry event, and we did. We got there. We had to reduce the scope a lot, right? Once we knew what the quality expectation was, and within the first month or two, we sold to really large companies, big deals, and customers really liked the parts that we prioritized over quality. Internal alignment, once we shared some of that feedback and got everyone on board with it, folks definitely understood what we wanted. Then culture and team, we certainly had to handpick the right people to work with that could help us meet those customer expectations and had the skill sets. And also from a culture standpoint, had to double down on how are we testing, how are we making sure that we were going to check all of those boxes. So it was a really fun product launch by the end, but took a lot of work. So I'll leave you with all of this. I think we're sharing the slides after Hillary had mentioned. So this is, everything in a nutshell. This is the operating manual. Pull the quality lever, right? First, you need to pull the quality lever. You feel like you're kind of getting crunched by all these constraints. Then start with quality. Make features, deadlines, costs the function of product excellence, not the other way around. To do that, you got to understand the corporate strategy. Then figure out a product strategy based on customers' quality expectations. Make sure that's well defined. And then it's time to start shopping those ideas around your organization. Get that internal alignment. If you need to model change within your own sphere of influence, please do that. Tie those outcomes back to the business strategy and communicate your success. And then finally, cultivate a will and way culture team and keep score. Make sure those quality expectations are actually being met. And from there, you should win. And I hope you all win. And I'd love to hear from you as if you take on any of this or add your own elements to it. Any questions about it? I geek out on this stuff, so I would love to hear all of your ideas. And here's how you can reach me if you'd like to stay in touch. I'd love to meet all of you. Got a blog called builditshipit.com, Twitter handle, same name, and then LinkedIn and email. So I think we're taking some questions and answers now, and yeah, really want to thank everyone for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate it. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. I know we probably have time for a few of them, so I'll just jump right in. But thank you for that, and did want to make sure we show this slide so that you could give folks a chance to connect with you outside of this. Okay, so I'll start with one that I dropped that just to level set. So I think a question that's been on my mind around this topic as we've been talking about it the past couple weeks is that often as product managers, we might think about quality as the responsibility of other teams like engineering or QA. So just getting your perspective on how you think product managers should think about their role and responsibility in quality. And obviously you touched on a lot of this throughout the presentation, but just kind of level setting that I think would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I've in kind of I'll say fighting this battle or engaging in this battle of I think we need to pay more attention to quality and maybe instead of features or instead of getting stuff out quicker. I think often where I've been asked to help is as a product manager, you prioritize it. We set the priorities, right? That is our job is which problem. I mean, my old boss, I think he defined product management the best I've ever heard it defined, which is it's our job to figure out the right problems to solve and the right ways to solve it. And I think where we can be helpful is making that case and stating that case that really high quality, right, or the right level of quality, I should say, needs to be a priority. And whatever that might end up being, if you start going that level deeper into, is it performance, is it scale, is it usability, right? Maybe it's just not intuitive enough. All those things I think is where a product manager can chime in, and also bringing the right data and qualitative customer information back to these discussions too.
Got it. Thank you. And then a question from Charlotte. So when thinking about evolving the strategy, are there places you recommend starting? Like, should we tackle the place of most resistance first, or start with those who we think will be easier to get on board, or does it depend? And if it does depend, are there certain things that you have considered each time you make that call?
Yeah, that's a great point. I personally like to start. I like to start with those, call them the squeaky wheels, in most of what I do, and just understanding where their point of view is, and just asking questions. But what's really helpful, I think, is having that corporate strategy as something to fall back on, right? And as long as everyone's aligned to that, and our priorities or our change in direction is feeding into that, it's hard to refute. But I do think going after the folks that might be most resistant, rather than blindsiding them and having that, because what will often happen is you'll get a few folks that might agree with you, right? You might even get approval to go ahead and evolve the strategy, and then that comes down. They receive word of it, and there's pushback, and not everyone's going to get on board, and that ends up having an effect on the culture too. So I think it's really important to try the best you can to get some of the folks that are maybe going to be resistant on your side. My only caveat was it is going to take time, probably more than a few conversations.
Got it. Thanks, John. One other question. A few minutes ago, you mentioned product managers bringing qualitative and quantitative data to the table around things like, customer interviews or other data sources. So another question I had was around if there's a way you would recommend getting a sense of customer expectations about quality.
Yeah, in terms of direct customer expectations.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think there's a few different inputs to that. Probably some more classic product management tactics, right? So looking into things like your win-loss, talking to salespeople about, yeah, you told me that, we lost that deal because of timing or, value, right? I always see that one in our CRM, that we lost the deal because of product value. And then when I start talking to the sales rep, it's actually, well, the value they see is if we can only get them to, if the product can only do this, that doesn't have much value. So you start to learn, well, wait a minute. So if we did it better or we did it differently, it would have value then. And often they'll say, yeah, we could have closed that deal had our product, performed a different way or been at a different level of quality. And I think that's helpful. I mean, there's also just competitive analysis, right? Again, based on the strategy that you're employed in the market that you're in, trying to understand where competitors are and setting the right benchmarks around where you need to be. Those are just a couple of them.
Great. Thank you. And then I think maybe time for one more question. So there's one from Aaron. Let me know, Aaron, if I need to clarify at all, or John, if I need to. But how do you evaluate your product strategy by market leader's strength, top quadrant performer strategy, their features, gaps in leadership, et cetera, mapping to value impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Am I hearing that right? It's trying to map the value back to features, or is that?
No, is it okay if I
Yeah, go for it.
No, thank you for the great presentation. No, it's there's a pretty robust research around the value of the leadership of top quadrants within sectors, segments, et cetera, right? They get 80% of the profits, 90% of the 80-90% of the customer sat, et cetera. So do you take a strategy at all to look at sort of market leaders' strengths when you're mapping out your product strategy? Or is it just straight sort of client impact in your feature factory, kind of in your backlog? Does that make sense? So like if a client asks you for feature X, but you see a top quadrant leader has deprecated that, that's a signal, obviously. And so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
follow the signal of, and then where this all folds is what percentage of your clients are top quadrants, because that's this concept of market velocity that people are starting to study, is that top quadrants target other top quadrants as their customers. So they're just like everyone's grabbing the top cream of the crop across the board, and then everybody else is sort of fighting in the mush.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle. It's like almost like the 80-20 rule in a way. I've struggled with that a little bit because just back to the strategy, framework, and I know it's overly simplistic, but I sometimes feel like those Forrester or Gartner, Magic Quadrants that they publish are really focused or kind of skewed toward differentiation, right? So the ones you're going to see up in the top right are typically those that are unique and differentiated and maybe more of the premium product because they are doing a feature by feature analysis. And I think that can be problematic. I think if you can do a smaller set of things really well, that could still be differentiated too, right? So, and I think for a product team, it actually helps because you have less surface area to cover. That's one area where I've struggled is we've got so many capabilities and features that we're leaving ourselves exposed to something, a lot of things could break overnight now. Whereas if we kept it narrow and could say we do these things the very best, that gives us a different kind of competitive lens. But I also think that's when quality now becomes a differentiator in itself, right? Yeah, that's a good question though.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And thank you, John. So I just want to put 2 quick notes here at the end. I dropped the link to a survey through Google Forms in the chat. If folks could take a look and just spend 2 minutes giving some feedback, that would be amazing, both specifically on John's, presentation and what you enjoyed, what you'd like to see more of in the future, but also we have options in there for you to drop notes and ideas about future events, the topics you want to make sure to cover, speakers you're interested in, lenses, etc. So please fill that out if you could. We'll also send it in a message when we send a link to the recording in the next day or so. And then the second thing is just thank you so much, John, for a great presentation and for your time and preparation for today and being willing to kind of reach out to the BPMA community. So just a reminder, we'll include a link to the slide deck as well so you know exactly where to reach John. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me and thanks everyone for making time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We'll hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.